Hello. So this is Saleh Musa from Text Duty. I'm glad to be here to present our work in this TRB. So I'll give a very quick overview about this abstract so you can go over it. Of course, questions are welcome. So first, the abstract. This is the abstract of the study. So this study, as the title says, it's focusing on identifying the feature levels associated with safety critical events. And this is a naturalistic driving study. We have a naturalistic driving data and we interested to see the levels within the features that are associated with safety critical events, and we are using here a hybrid Catboost method, and this is a purely machine learning method but it's a combination of two methods as you will see here. So jumping into the methodology will give you a good idea about what we are doing in this study. So as you see here in the methodology, first we start the data pre-processing, and this is dealing with the Sharp 2 NDS data reports where we are merging 7 records, and then we merge the crash and near crash records as well. And we merge the crash and near crash into one event, safety critical event. And then we regroup the variables into list categories. So some of the variables had, for instance, had for instance about 12 categories, and some of these categories were the same. It was just some text processing. So we just regroup these variables, and some of the variables deemed had very low frequency of occurrence. So some of the variables occurred 1% of the time. So we started to see which variable seems to be pretty much relevant to each other, and we grouped them into more homogeneous variables. And once we had this, we matched the data set with we merged all the records, and these records include, as you can see in the paper later on. If you're interested, you can go through the paper. It includes driver behavior as well, and the driver behavior is not just the socioeconomic factor. It's also dives deep into medical records of the drivers as well. So and for more info about this, I know we're still in the methodology, but you can jump into the summary, this table, the summary of the Sharp 2 NDS data used in this study. This gives you a good summary of the final variables that were used after grouping or after merging all the records. And these are typically from variable number 1 to variable number 28. The last one, this is the level of safety of the event. This is the Y, because as we will see later on, this is what we're gonna try to predict. So you can think about it as from variable 1 to 28. These were the variables that were grouped and merged together from the different records. We'll come back to this, but going back to the methodology, once we did the data, we start the hybrid level of safety detection model, and we start this by a combination of grid search and tenfold cross validation to develop the full Catboost model. These are very common techniques in machine learning. Grid search is just means that if you want to develop a machine learning model and you have a set of hyperparameters, you're gonna typically try all the possible values of the hyperparameters. And when I say the possible values, they're infinite. So we did some discretization and we brought the continuous space into some discrete values, and based on our previous knowledge with this algorithm, we worked on a specific grid with a specific grid of hyperparameter values, and then we perform tenfold cross validation. The tenfold cross validation is simply breaking the training data into 10 partitions, and then these 10 partitions, you keep 1/10 of these partitions, so one of these partitions away for validation, and then 9 of these partitions are used for training the model. And then after that, you shift, you take apart another partition and you train on another 10 partitions. So you repeat the process 10 times using the 10 distinct partitions, 9 for training and 1 for validation, and then you come up with average validation value. This way, using these two techniques, you're pretty much you confident in your model that it's gonna perform well, because you are typically testing the model. Then once we did this, we used um, the tree-based ensemble algorithm, because you know Catboost is tree-based ensemble algorithm. Um, we used its feature of reporting the feature importance, and we applied clustering on the feature importance. And after we applied clustering, we reduced the model. So instead of using all these variables, we reduced the model for less variables, and then we retrained the model again using the reduced values. And finally, we now have a reduced model. The reduced model is trained in the similar way like the full model, but with less variables. And then we test the model. Once we tested the model and we are confident in its performance, we performed some simulation runs for identifying the feature level associated with safety critical event. So I'll go quickly on the rest of the steps, since this summarizes almost all the steps we did in the research. So here, this table is just a summary of the variables, and as you can see here, we have driver impairment, secondary task, lighting, weather. So just looking into weather, surface condition, you're gonna figure out that some of these variables are very much of these variables are correlated, and this is why we're using this good technique, the Catboost, because generally tree-based ensemble algorithms are very good in dealing with multi-collinearity or variables that are having high correlation values. So these were the variables that we used: a combination of socioeconomic factor, a combination of knowledge, driver knowledge, like the driver knowledge here variable, which is the score, scores for specific interview about his knowledge, some medical or abilities, ADHD score, cognitive abilities, visual impairment, 2 types of visual impairment, and so on. So these are just the validation results showing to you how much the impact of the different hyperparameter values. And looking into the validation results, you need to know that as the EUC value comes up, the hyperparameters combination is good. So we typically look for the highest EUC value. And as you can see, the feature importance variables in the full model, and in this table, in this table, we are reporting the important variables. So this is a very good thing that tree-based algorithms in general, including the Catboost, do. They report the importance of the features, how important they were used in the model, in developing the model. So just looking into this, I mean, it was very good, and it was expected to see that secondary tasks come on the top of the list, followed by intersection influence, followed by income, traffic density, age group, and so on. So this just gives you a hint which variable is good, but so far you don't know which feature in this variable is more associated with safety critical events, or even with baseline events, which we can consider as proxy for safe driving. So to do this, first we started, as we mentioned, we did clustering analysis. We applied the clustering analysis on the relative importance values of the variables. So we just applied the clustering on these numbers, in the numbers and the feature importance of the variables. And once we applied the clustering analysis, we were keen to see what the optimal number of clusters, after which there is no significant increase in the accuracy of the model. And just looking from the elbow plot here, it seems that cluster 6, taking 6 clusters is a good estimate. I would say someone else could say even taking clusters, not 5, 4 even might be also good, but we try to be to not lose accuracy as much as we can. But again, this is just a tool that can be used by anyone interested in applying the methodology to come up with good estimate of the number of variables to omit from the model. So we ended up using 6 clusters, and we did the clustering analysis. And as you can see here, all the variables in the 7th cluster and the 8th and the 9th as well, they were removed. Okay, so all these variables were removed. The ones in this red, rectangle were removed. So far, now we have our reduced model. We trained the model as mentioned before, like the full model with the same techniques, and now it's time for testing the model. And just for having a baseline performance, we tested the model against just simple decision tree algorithm, and decision tree algorithm that was also developed using grid search and tenfold cross validation. And these were the final performance metrics. As you can see here, the performance of the Catboost, it was really good. I mean, this is the confusion matrix here, and you can direct jump into the sensitivity and the specificity. The sensitivity, it's the performance of the model over the safety critical event. How accurate is the model in detecting safety critical event? The specificity is the accuracy of the model in detecting the baseline event. So in our study, we were interested in both, really. We could have improved the accuracy of one of them, the sensitivity or specificity, but then we're gonna perform some trade-off for the other one. But in this study, we were keen to have the highest, because good thing to consider in this research or this type of analysis, that even when you are pretty sure that the specificity is good, which is the baseline event, then you can try to start to extract the features that are associated with safe driving. So this can go in both directions, and this is what I like in developing models, considering both sensitivity and specificity, or considering the baseline events and the safety critical events. Then we come to the last and most interesting part, which is simulation runs. And this is typically how we did it. For each variable in the study, we split the entire data set, training and testing, into categories, and these categories were based on the feature levels of this variable. So based on the feature level, the data was split in the categories. So assuming that 60% of the data was female and 40% were male, so the data was split into these categories, and the model was applied for each of these categories, and then the average output was calculated. And then it's important to know, once the average exceeds 0.5, then typically this feature is more associated with crashes, because crashes is the model reports crash whenever the probability is greater than 0.5. So these are the summary of the simulation results, and this was done for each feature. And it's important to consider this legend when looking to this chart. And I would say just looking into the blue ones and looking into these red ones are the feature level having the highest association with safety critical events. And you can also look into the blue ones, but the low values. These are very important, by the way. So just looking for the red ones. So here in the secondary task, so objects in the vehicle. So for instance, driver, while driving, trying to reach to something there in the vehicle, either his phone or not necessarily the phone, anything in the vehicle, he's trying to set up something in the vehicle. This is one of the highest features or levels that are associated with safety critical events. And the same for the pet interaction as well. And the reaching for the objects, we just said it. So for the pet interaction as well, pet interaction was one of the highest feature levels that were associated with safety critical events. Very interestingly, looking into this, if you can look here in the passenger interaction, it's 0.35. So passenger interaction is actually more associated with safe driving, not safety critical, with baseline events, with safe driving. So the more you're interacting with the passenger beside you, the less likely you're gonna have an accident. And this is very interesting, because it makes sense. The way that people interact with passengers is totally different than the way that they interact, for instance, with their pets. That's why the interaction with the pets is having higher risk compared to the passenger interaction. I mean, there are plenty of things that can be extracted from this analysis, but jumping into the key findings out of these charts, just summarizing them, the highest associations, when we say highest, we mean from 70 to 87, was recorded for some of the levels for the secondary task, intersection influence, and traffic density features. And just looking into the feature importance table, you will find these variables were ranked high. So this is not something that was not expected. But jumping into the levels within these features, you would find that engagement with object in the vehicle, or driving in parking lots, driveways, entrance and exits, and driving at level of service D. These conditions had 87, 85, and 80% association with safety critical event, which is very high. Other high involvement also safety critical include reaching for objects, which was 77, pet interaction 70, and driving under level of service of D, which is had 77. And level of service, so this is, I think this is a typo, because level of service D was here. So this is a typo. I'm pretty sure this shouldn't be level of service D. This should be another level of service. I would say C. Yeah, this should be C. So the other one, the driving under level of service C, developed 77% association with safety critical event, and level of service E and F had 70% association with safety critical event. And driving under intersection influence of under uncontrolled intersection had 75%, and for traffic signal it had 73. For the age group, it had moderate association, 61 with safety critical event, only for the 16 to 19 age group. So the 16 to 19 age group were the most vulnerable age group among other age groups. And then for the sensation seeking, and this is very interesting, the sensation seeking is a test which tests how likely the sensational, it's a test measuring. So it's some sort of a test or questionnaire that measures the degree to which the driver engaged in sensational seeking behavior, which is some sort of, you can consider it how much the driver is willing to take risk. This is the easiest way I could interpret this test. So it had those who are scoring 18 to 35, 35 was the maximum score. So these scored the highest value in the sensational seeking, and those with the lowest driving knowledge, scoring from 0 to 8.9 driving knowledge. This was a questionnaire to test how much familiar the driver with the roadway rules and driving and traffic rules. And gender equal female, all these had mild association with safety critical events. And it's important to note that when we say mild, it means that there is an association. I mean, it's just small, but compared to the other feature levels, so for the sensation seeking, for the other scores lower than 18, and for the driver knowledge above 8.9, and for the males, the association, there is almost no association with safety critical events. So we can deduce that these feature levels are more associated with safety critical event. And finally, passenger interaction, eating and drinking, even driving away of the intersections or the interchange, not close to them, and being from 70 to 79 old, or driving in traffic density A, all these reduces the safety critical event risk significantly. So this was a very brief overview. I'm glad to hear any questions, and thank you very much for your time and your interest in our work.